everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. This is Francis, and once again with me, I have Davis Winkie, soldier and reporter for Army Times, staff reporter for Army Times. Davis, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Francis. And since you said the soldier word, here's where I say I'm not in a duty status, and I'm speaking for myself out of my day job.
Yes. Many times this podcast has been recorded while I was on a lunch break during drill weekends, but no longer do I have to break you CMJ. But thankfully, you are also not breaking you CMJ. So technically, we're in the legal clear. So I've ran that by our barracks lawyer. So I think we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Carrie. It's Shocks, who is a more of a Massachusetts lawyer, and he's an ex-coastie. But it's all kind of the same thing. So Davis, I wanted to bring you on because there's a lot of stuff going on, and you are a well-rounded journalist who covers a lot of things for Army Times. And I know that a lot of the big stuff right now is Ukraine. Now, when this episode comes out, I want to point out we're recording this on March 11th. So when this episode comes out, God knows everything is going to be weird and different and changed and all that. And I don't think we're not really going to talk about Ukraine too much because we've covered that on our regular episodes in a few other places. But I do kind of want to go through just a lot of the articles that you've put up over the last couple of days or last couple of weeks, really. And because again, you're covering a lot of different things that I feel get lost in much of the noise of Ukraine conflict that's kind of happening. So before we jumped on to this, you were just finishing up an article about a religious vaccine mandate that finally somebody got a religious exemption from the vaccine. So which branch of service managed to drop the ball on this one? I'm going to say Marines.
The Army, the service that had the latest vaccine compliance date of all the other services, like the Guard and Reserve, by the way, still don't have to be vaccinated. That deadline's not until June 30th. But the active duty Army had the latest deadline of all active duty components. And it was also the last among the services to approve a religious exemption. So team religious exemption is now at 1 approved, 536 denied, and a few thousand still pending. For those of you doing the math at home, that is a 0.18% success rate thus far.
What did that one person? What did they write that they got that over everybody else? It feels like one of those, write 5 paragraphs and we'll pick a winner to, go to Hollywood studios or something like that. But except that you don't have to get a vaccination for some reason.
Yeah. And we don't know for sure why yet this particular one was approved. When the Marine Corps approved their first handful of religious exemptions, they explained that it was for Marines who had locked in plans to leave the service, but that were kind of longer horizon than the window that would have given them an administrative exemption. So each of the services has hey, if you're ETSing in, I'm just going to say 90 days. I don't know what the actual number is off the top of my head. But say you're ETSing within that window, you can get an admin exemption where they're okay, you don't have to get the shot. You're leaving anyways. For the Marines, though, they had some people who had a bunch of terminal leave saved up because COVID has let people bank twice as much leave as usual. Or if they had the career transition program, which is a DoD thing where you can do a internship with a company for several months before you get out, while still being on the DoD payroll. And one of the Marines who was approved was about to start one of those and was locked in and on his way out. And the Army wouldn't answer to me today exactly what the situation was with this one Joe who got their accommodation approved. The statement was the Department of the Army has approved one religious accommodation. The Army determined the service members' accommodation could be supported with no impact to mission readiness. We do not have any additional info for release on this approval. I don't want to read between the lines too hard on that, but it's probably somebody on their way out the door, if I had to guess. This isn't something I think where it's like a Jehovah's Witness who's going to then do 20 years and be skipping the flu shot every year or something like that. I really think it's probably a guy on his way out.
Yeah, and that is the easiest way. Is like, I don't want to fucking fight it. Fine, you're exempt as long as you get out. And that does seem. There was recently a couple of articles about a naval ship commander who refused to get the vaccine, and but it was upheld that he didn't have to get it. But the Navy's just like, that's fine. If we can't transfer him, then that ship just goes nowhere and does nothing until he's done with his rotation there. Which is always an interesting, like, it's always a little shocking to realize how little like control the Army and the military really has over their own shit sometimes. Like something like that is just like, no, this is our, this is UCMJ stuff. This is our shit. We should be the ones who make these calls. You don't want to get the vaccine, fine, we'll relieve you and put somebody else in charge. But somehow a court system gets to say no, that the military can't do that. So it's very strange how we're allowing all of this, and I'm going to be very curious as to where this kind of goes in the future with other vaccinations. Because fucking, if Joe wants to go overseas anywhere, he's going to have to get a smallpox vaccine, and that's a harsh one. That's not fun like the COVID one. The smallpox will fuck you up for weeks.
Yeah, doesn't that leave like a scar on your shoulder? I'm yet to experience that rite of passage.
Yeah, it's like it's not even just like they give you one shot. It's like a subcutaneous, like just underneath the skin. I feel like, well, at least my scar, it looks like there was probably about 6 or 7 needles all told that are used to inject whatever this is, and then it just scabs up. And then everybody has different reactions to it, but the thing is just like, look, you can't. For the next 2 weeks, do not touch a newborn because you will give that newborn smallpox and they will die. So like they kind of quarantine all of us too. It's just like, we give you the shot, everybody stays in the barracks. I mean, we're all training to go overseas anyway, so it didn't matter. But just no contact with people outside because we're literally getting a live vaccine or a live version of the smallpox that we could transmit to somebody else, and they don't want to do that. So it's a gnarly fucking shot. And also, as I have pointed out many times in the past on the show, I had to go get anthrax shots, which were not approved by anybody. The
anthrax. Oof.
Yeah, they sent me. They sent me to it. Like, I had to get the first shot, and I think I was slated to get the second shot, and I just kept not going because I kept reading articles about how you shouldn't get the shot. And then I guess enough journalists finally yelled about it that the Army was like, yeah, I guess we can stop doing this. Because I mean, look, nobody's fucking using anthrax. Nobody's even using smallpox. It's ridiculous we got smallpox vaccines, but at least I'm not going to die like a 15th century conquistador. So I guess I've got that going for me.
Come on, man. Don't you know there's the bioweapons labs in Ukraine, apparently?
Yeah, all of that. Putting coronavirus into bats and sending it to giving. I think my favorite was that they were collecting Slavic DNA to tailor a coronavirus towards the Slavs. Sure, why not? I've heard dumber things come out of my own government, so I guess I can let that one go. So let's see, what else do we have? Sorry, okay. Next one, and this is one that we were kind of talking about, and this goes in hand with another article that you sent me about a soldier who was apparently abusing his wife. And then, like, her friend came to beat the shit out of him, and he shot her. And now he shot the guy. The husband shot the guy coming to beat him up, I guess. And there's just this whole thing is very strange. So the headline is "Murder Charge Dismissed for Soldier Who Beat Wife shot her friend, which is a wild kind of thing. But it does, as you go through it, it does kind of lay out what's going on. So what is going on with this one?
Yeah, so I had covered this story last year. I have a really bad habit of trawling the court martial docket just to see if there's anything interesting. And when I see something like a murder pop up, I'll usually just pop in a request like, "Hey, I want to see what this guy's charged with." And in this case, there was a guy at Fort Stewart getting court-martialed at Fort Stewart on a murder charge. And then when I get the charge sheet, it says he'd killed a guy in El Paso. I was like, "Oh, that's weird." And I started looking into it more. And I found that some of the gun nut forums had like hailed this guy as a self-defense hero, which made me really interested. I'm like, "Oh, is this guy getting tried for a killing that was considered self-defense by civilian authorities?" And so I just tossed in a Information Act request last year for the El Paso case file, and just found this wild story where apparently this guy was living in, and I'll kind of couch attribution here. All of this is according to the police report, and what witnesses told police, et cetera, et cetera. So this guy is living off post in El Paso. He's assigned to a unit at Fort Bliss, and one night his wife sends like an Instagram message to a friend saying something about like, "Hey, my husband's beating me up," or something like that. And 7 people pile into a car and drive over to this apartment complex and are like, "Hey, we're here to get her." And she leaves the apartment and is outside the apartment. Nobody is actively being beaten, but like there's broken glass out in the hallway or landing area. She's got some bruises on her arms that the cops later saw. The detective on the case later wrote that there was a history of family violence there. Another soldier who was a neighbor said, "Oh, the cops have been called there before for domestic stuff." It was like there was definitely some abuse going on. And this guy actually later got convicted of domestic violence, so we'll come back to that. But like the wife is out of the apartment. Nobody's getting actively beaten. And this dude who had come to help her takes off his shirt. He's got a bandana tied around his hand, and he starts for the apartment like he's going to go beat this guy's ass. And the wife says, "Don't go in there. He's got a gun." And this guy goes in there and he gets shot 6 times. The soldier shot him 6 times with his Glock, and then was like super calmly about it. Unloaded it, sat there, got out his little like concealed carry insurance card that had like lawyers' information on it and stuff. And waited for the police to show up. And within 24 hours, the El Paso police had put out a press release saying like, "Yeah, this was justified homicide. This dude was doing burglary," which in Texas means entering a home without consent with the intent to do crime. And, beating somebody's ass is in fact crime. Especially in the thing here is that like, if this guy had been actively beating his wife when the victim or when the guy who was shot tried to come into the apartment to stop it, that would be a completely different ballgame from a self-defense perspective. But the way that Texas's castle doctrine works, this was pretty cut and dried in terms of being a self-defense shooting. And a grand jury ultimately agreed, and they didn't charge the case. And meanwhile, the police never presented any domestic violence offense report to the DA either. So like, there's no charges at all that stemmed from that night. And we're not sure why. We're not sure why the domestic violence stuff never really materialized. We do know that later on, this guy gets convicted later on of like forcing his wife to recant allegations So like maybe that's a situation that happened here.
Yeah,
Um,
that very much sounds like the cop saying, "Well, if she's not going to say anything, if she's not going to press charges, there's nothing we can do
well,
about it."
and like put yourself in her shoes, man.
Yeah,
Like she just watched him gun down her friend
yeah,
right in the
yeah.
door of their apartment. This guy, is willing to use deadly force
Very
when
calmly
he
too.
feels threatened.
Yeah.
And so where this got weird though was Fort Bliss catches wind that he kills a guy. We're not sure how. We're not sure who knew what or when. The Fort Bliss officials really didn't want to tell me a lot about this. But they confirmed that he was rapidly PCS to Fort Stewart and that the PCS was related to the shooting. The Army has some programs like Threat to Life, where if somebody has credible threats against them, they can get like an expedited PCS or something like that. But one of the things I really had trouble with when I was reporting the first story, where I was like, you're willing to be aware, like you're aware that this guy has killed somebody and you're PCSing him for it, but nobody's going to ask
Mm-hmm.
why this guy showed up and tried to come into his apartment. And
it's very reminiscent of like everything that's been happening on Fort Bragg, around the special forces. How it's just like obvious crimes are constantly happening. Obviously, there's murders and shootings, and they're murdering each other if they're not beating the shit out of their spouses. And it's just kind of a like, we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to, we just kind of want to scrub our hands clean of it, move them along, and maybe they won't do it again. It's always like the Army. One of the things that the Army really needs to get better about is to stop doing this whole like pass the buck kind of thing, where there's just like, we just don't want to deal with it. Maybe somebody else will deal with it. Let's move them away, like as if they're the Boston Archdiocese or something. Just like, it's just a little bit of molestation. Just send them to a different place where nobody's going to talk about it, and maybe they're going to end up doing something again. I'm glad that this guy ended up getting hemmed up eventually on at least the domestic violence charges, but also, like, if she was out and she was safe, man, get her away from there, and don't feel like you got to go in and do some ass beating, because it's America, man. But everybody's got a fucking gun at this point.
And it also speaks to I can understand how leaders could feel like they were doing the right thing by moving him if they didn't understand the entirety of the situation. Because like the kind of dudes who are going to pile 7 in a car and roll up, and then one's going to like try to come into your apartment to beat your ass. Like I could see where somebody would be legitimately concerned about retaliation from other people who either knew that guy or were involved with that guy. Like I can understand PCS from that perspective. What I really struggled with was, how does a soldier squad leader not sit him down and just hot seat him when he kills somebody? And then, like he PCSs to Fort Stewart. Later that year, CID learns that he's been beating his wife there. And it's incidentally during the domestic violence investigation, which didn't start until 3 months after the shooting and after the PCS. Might even be like 5 months after. It wasn't until that investigation that CID even knew that he'd killed somebody.
Huh.
And so basically what our investigation found was like the information sharing between El Paso PD, the El Paso DA, and CID was just dog shit in that situation, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Well, didn't the Air Force get hemmed up on that a while ago, since they had one of their guys who was very obviously like probably going to do a mass shooting, and then he did a mass shooting, and then the Air Force,
that situation
got sued for that one.
Yeah, so the that's related to the Sutherland Springs church shooting in Texas that happened a few years ago. Basically, it was a situation where a guy in the Air Force gets kicked out for doing domestic violence. The Air Force failed to properly enter him into a system that would have Lautenberged him from being able to have a weapon ever again. And instead, like, he bought the weapon that he killed all those people with, and he wouldn't have been able to buy it if they'd done the proper actions with database entries and stuff. And that's why they ended up getting found liable. And so, like, yeah, that means there are broader questions about whether our administrative systems are doing enough to capture, track this stuff, and prevent it. In this case, his wife PCS'd with him and had to endure months more of abuse after having seen him kill someone who was trying to help her, even if the way he was trying to help her was counterproductive. And there was a real cost of it. And then to come back to today, he eventually got charged with murder under UCMJ because UCMJ doesn't have Castle Doctrine self-defense protections. It's basically just like you can only use force proportionate to the threat that you face. And proving that a shirtless, unarmed dude was going to be able to do grievous bodily harm is kind of a high bar when it comes to trying to establish self-defense in this case. But the Army just quietly dismissed the charge in January, and wouldn't really tell me much about why, other than that the available evidence did not support taking the case to trial. I don't want to read too much into that. It might be something to do with witnesses not wanting to testify. It might be honestly just witness logistics if they can't make it from El Paso to Fort Stewart, where the Fort Stewart's near Savannah, Georgia, for those of you out there who aren't as immersed in this hellish bureaucracy as I am. But there's very practical concerns about getting people to testify. And then also, like, I think some of these people don't want to be found. I tried to find this guy's ex-wife. I tried to find the witnesses. I tried phone numbers from the police report. I tried emails from public records. I couldn't get any of these people. And
that is also not surprising when it comes to violent crime in the military. That once you've broken away from it, fuck it. I just want them to stay away from me. And not wanting to bring those things back up because, again, like you said, like, we know that this guy obviously has no problem killing somebody, and that is, and knows how to legally do it, which is also kind of just kind of upsetting there. That it felt like that was a calculated move. But hey, also, if somebody's breaking into your house, the fuck are you supposed to do? I don't know. It is definitely, like, really the failing falls upon the military in this point, because it never should have gotten to this point. That guy should have been, the wife should have been taken out of that situation. The soldier should have been put, somebody should have done something. And this was a private, like you said, there's NCOs, and that is just a failure on upwards. Like, the NCOs hasn't made sure to let not only the soldiers, like, hey, go to the spouses too. Like, if you need something, please let me know. If there's problems, please let me know.
Like, if I'm at drill this weekend and one of my soldiers comes in and says, "Hey, sir, I killed somebody," I'm going to ask some questions.
Yeah, I got some questions. Got a lot of questions. Why was somebody trying to kill you is the first question. And that has got to be the, as you said, they just count it as a burglary, which does not, which that specific terminology does not encompass what was actually happening, which was somebody's coming to beat your ass because you were beating too many asses.
Yeah. And so that one, it was just kind of sad to see the way it plays out. Like I understand that from a legal perspective in Texas, this was a justified shooting. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, though,
there's a difference between a justified shooting and a shooting that could have been stopped. It's like I'm not going to go too far into Rittenhouse, but, like, the thing is that the Rittenhouse trial and shooting was specifically this instance is what we're looking at. And like legally, yeah, that's self-defense. But like there is this whole timeline also of just like this could have been avoided. Everybody could still be alive had anybody intervened, had any of the things that are supposed to stop these problems, they're supposed to stop something like this from happening, had actually happened. You know, a lot of laws were broken up to the point where this the shooting ended up happening, and you're like, well, it's self-defense, sure, but also why was anybody in this situation? And that's really
Yeah,
that's the
the
biggest
cops are at
failing
the
to it.
apartment the week before. The cops are at the apartment the week before. And if there are some, the relationship between CID, the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, and local law enforcement varies wildly from base to base. I'm dealing with a story right now about some domestic violence at Fort Stewart, where the Savannah Police Department picked up a guy who was beating on his girlfriend, and they alerted Fort Stewart CID within 72 hours that this had happened. And this guy ended up getting convicted of that and under UCMJ and some other stuff. But here in El Paso, there just did not seem to be the communication lines in place between CID and local authorities. Because if CID comes out and asserts jurisdiction and takes lead on investigating and charging this crime, like there's no justified homicide angle to it at all.
Right.
Like there is no castle doctrine under UCMJ, and UCMJ applies to all soldiers in a duty status worldwide. And something like double jeopardy wouldn't have applied here, because that only comes into play when somebody actually goes to trial. So yeah, I do see. Yeah, I do see ways that it could have been prevented. I do know that CID is trying to execute reforms, and part of those reforms that CID is trying is to be more proactive in asserting jurisdiction in cases involving soldiers off base. It's something where it's an idea that could work for something like this, but another where I'm going to believe it when I see it working.
Yeah. I would love for troop cops to do better, but I know troop cops too well. So,
well, they're making
see.
More of them civilians now.
Oh, Jesus. All right. So let's move a little bit. We got two stories that you've done about Ukraine. One of them is something that you mentioned that that the United States has been doing for a while. Now this is how the US and Europe helped Ukraine prep for insurgency. It's an article about how the United States was helping, basically like, look, after 2014 in Ukraine, you guys will probably have to do all of this again, and we're going to train you on how to fight an insurgency against the Russians, which like is the one thing that I feel like we are, as American soldiers, like good at training people how to do, because we got fucked up by insurgency for 20 fucking years. So we at least be like, look, here's what they did to us. Why don't you try that? But they come around. Here's how to make an IED. Here's how to, snipe from places or whatever. So what are some of the kind of trainings and what it was going on behind this?
So the bigger picture here is that with security in Eastern Europe in recent years, what Russia did to Ukraine in 2014 when they invaded and annexed Crimea, when they invaded and pretended they weren't there, and Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasts or provinces, I guess. I'm going to be less of a douche about that. And masqueraded as separatists in order to wage war against the Ukrainian government, that kind of put Europe on notice and made them start looking for ways to cost-effective ways to improve their national defense plans, and maybe like increase deterrence against a potential Russian invasion and occupation. Which, for a few years seemed silly, but it seems less silly today than it did 3 weeks ago.
I do. Well, I mean, Ukraine already had Russia invade them. And I was one of those like skeptical of Russia trying to do a full scale invasion on Ukraine as well. But like, really should have just been like, yeah, it's like they've done this within the last decade. It's not out of purview that they might try to do something a little bit bigger and take the rest of the country. And we're seeing how they step on their dicks with that one.
And what had me more worried that it was going to happen than not was some of the stuff we saw Putin publish about like the ethnic closeness of Russia and Ukraine, and like getting into this weird ethno-nationalism stuff. That's when I worried that it might be possible, but man, I didn't think it would even look like this.
He pulled out his calipers and all of a sudden decided to send 200,000 troops in.
Yeah, to include their National Guard equivalent. Weekend warriors getting more than they bargained for.
Look, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, and just two-week invasion, in and out. Promise, guys. It'll be real quick. Ukraine's got nothing. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. You've got plenty of gas. You don't need more gas. You're fine.
Get your Russian GI Bill.
You know, I complain about the army a lot, the United States Army, but goddamn, like if you got to be in an army, the United States one is a good one to be in. Because like, look, we shouldn't have invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. However, our logistics were on point, so we at least had that going for us. Everything else was shit, but we had gas at least.
I mean, hell, there was Pizza Hut on Bagram.
Hell yeah, there was. It's going to be a while before Russia can set up their forward operating Burger King.
Well, the sanctions mean never. But yeah, back on the kind of the broader picture, a lot of like special operations minds and strategic planners in the U.S., NATO, and other like allied and partner European security bubble came up with this idea called the resistance operating concept. And the basic idea behind the ROC is learn from case studies of successful resistance movements and insurgencies in the past, and pick out the key elements of training, preparation, legal framework, and like societal preparation through things like civil defense messaging, etc., that could help a country to lay the groundwork for insurgency, and then warn Russia, hey, we're prepared to do insurgency before an invasion ever happens. The idea is to make a country that might otherwise be a speed bump for a Russian invasion. Think like Estonia. Estonia is a tiny Baltic country bordering Russia. It is in NATO, which means it could invoke Article 5 to spark World War III if it were to get invaded by Russia. But like their conventional military would probably just be a speed bump to the Russian military, or at least what we thought the Russian military was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, you know what? If you hit a speed bump too fast, it'll fuck up your axles, all right?
Yeah, but if you like lay the plans and make it clear that like, yeah, you might be able to push through and take our cities and fight this war moving forward, but we're going to be wreaking havoc in your rear area with some insurgency shit the whole time. The idea is to make these countries a bitter pill to swallow if they're ever invaded and occupied, or even just like partially invaded, partially occupied. And that idea has been kind of developing. A draft version of the ROC was circulated among countries like beginning in 2018. It was finally codified and published in 2020. But even in like 2018, that's when American and European special operations officials took these draft copies and like sat down in capitals around Europe and were like, hey, we can go ahead and get to work on this. And that's exactly what's been going on in Kiev since 2018. And the way that really paid off was not in like training and equipping, because Ukraine already has the most combat experienced population in Europe because of their ongoing war with Russia since 2014. It was more about establishing the legal framework that would bring a resistance movement under the command of the armed forces, that would establish, like chains of command and the ways that weapons and stuff could be legally transferred to resistance movements, to like these militias we're seeing people sign up for with these lines to get rifles in Kiev. It really took that step that really would enable external support, and we've seen that exploited to the hilt already by NATO, by non-NATO but aligned countries. And I would say it's paying off. We don't know what a eventual insurgency would look like here, because Ukraine's government is not going quietly into the night. But it really looks like these efforts to harden Ukraine for a potential insurgency have paid off so far.
Yeah, like there's still a very good chance that Russia will end up taking the country, because if there's one thing that Russia loves to do, it's feed conscripts into a wood chipper, and they've got plenty of them, so they have no problem. It's just like, yeah, we got 20,000 dead or whatever, but we bombed Kyiv until it was a pile of rubble, and now we own that pile of rubble. We win. A very Russian kind of win, but you can take it, but can you hold it at that point? We certainly, we in Iraq and Afghanistan, we in a way held the country, but Russia didn't do too well in Afghanistan themselves either. So I can't imagine what a well-equipped, well-armed, and highly trained, not to say that the Taliban and ISIS were a bunch of pushovers, but they were not Ukraine. Like, I am very glad that when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, that I never saw this kind of resistance, because this is harrowing. I've actually read a story about a UK soldier, an ex-soldier, who went to Ukraine and was just like, "Oh shit, this is a real war. What the fuck?" Because we're not. What kind of war are we? So where we have air superiority, where we have ground superiority, where the biggest thing you have to worry about is maybe an RPG or maybe one anti-tank guided missile hitting something, and some small arms fire. Beyond that, the insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan did not have the firepower or really the civic backing as they do now. Like, just watching a bunch of Ukrainian people sit around just making Molotov cocktails. Just like, let's get them made. We chuck them out of windows. We'll all just go up into our things and throw them at the Russians, and it'll be great. It'll be a party. Didn't have that in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm glad to see that there has been preparation for this. And I also think the fact that nobody really likes Russia to begin with has really also helped bolster this. I am certainly not one of those, fuck every Russian in the world kind of person, because I certainly wouldn't want to be judged by my government either. However, this isn't a fucking good thing, guys. And to say that this isn't Russian imperialism is absolutely asinine. So the next article is entitled, "No, the Army isn't sending Ukraine draft notices via text." I am flabbergasted by anybody believing that this might be real. I don't know. What's the scam here, Davis? What are we trying to? What are they trying to get out of me here with this?
I don't know, man. So my guess here is that when they get you on the phone, because the goal with the scam is always to get somebody on the phone. Because if somebody's on the phone and you sound official and you sound like you know what you're doing, you can probably socially engineer anybody into doing whatever the hell you want them to do. And they'll probably get them on the phone and be like, yeah, we just want to make sure our info is correct. What's your current address? What's your social security number?
What's your last four and also your first five?
And your mother's maiden name while we're at it for the background check.
It's very important that we know the name of your first pet and your childhood best friend.
The make and model of your first car. But yeah, so we saw these text scams as well back in January 2020 at the height of the tensions between the U.S. and Iran after we smoked Soleimani in the Baghdad airport. Um, and they seem to like have a lot more circulation then, and to be frankly probably getting more people then. And like it was so weird because like all of these national outlets started doing these stories about like, oh my gosh, is there a draft coming? What would that look like? At the time I wasn't even a journalist yet. I was just somebody with a master's in military history who was working as a like a veterans history archivist. And I had some reporter from USA Today call me up and be like, yo, can you talk us through through a military draft? and and I ended up being cited in a story about it. People were just so thirsty about the idea of whether the draft would come back, probably just because of how dank the World War III memes were. Now they're not as funny.
No, it's not, and also they're seeing that Ukraine's kind of holding their own. However, it does seem that you can just kind of fly on over there and join up to some international brigade and go kill some Russians on your own if you really want to. I saw that you can become a citizen of Ukraine doing that. So you get EU benefits right there. I don't know if all I can really say that you're getting there is free healthcare. So much like joining the army in the United States, you too can go join a military somewhere and get some healthcare. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know what their
I'm not a
college.
shill for big army, but if you're going to join an army for free healthcare, at least the U.S. Army pays you. The volunteers in the like international brigade for the territorial defense of Ukraine or whatever the title is, they're not getting paid. You're getting paid in food, liquids, and whatever you can get off the Russians you kill.
Yeah, maybe. Hey, I spent 20 years in our United States Army, and it's got its ups and downs. I would say that I don't think that joining international brigades in Ukraine is going to get me a free flight out to Japan to spend 2 weeks kicking around with some Japanese military guys. So, which was a lot of fun. Those guys love to drink.
Well, speak for yourself, man. My last AT was at a mothballed prison, so your experiences may vary.
Don't become an MP. That's the first thing. If you're going to join the army, join the U.S. Army and become PAO, because one, we never have to actually do any real work. We just show up and take pictures, and two, you get to go to all the cool places. You want to go out to cover some dudes doing some tankers doing some tanker stuff. Great, go on out there, take some video, take some photos of them, and then while they have to continue to stay out there and sleep in the dirt for the next 3 weeks, you go back and file, and it's great. You got your internet, you got your hot and cold running water, everything that you need. Highly recommend being in a support role if you're going to join the military. It's way easier. It's way cleaner. Maybe it's not as manly, and if that's what you're going for, then I guess you can join the infantry and go get yelled at and have your dick in the dirt for 4 months or for 4 years and never really accomplish anything, I suppose. Looking forward to all of those DMs from all of the 11 Bang Bangs now. All right. So Davis, let's do one more here. Let's see, what else do we have? Yes, I wanted to talk about the Arctic Brigade level training rotation, CTC on ice. So if you are a soldier and you have gone to NTC and sucked shit there, or if you've gone to JRTC and sucked shit there, there's a brand new place for things to suck ass, and that is up in Alaska. So what's going on with the CTC on ice?
Yeah, so basically what the Army's done here is set up this CTC team that is mobile actually, and they can go out and do a full-size rotation in Hawaii or in Alaska. And we'll see if they end up being able to do it like elsewhere in the Pacific. Like it's the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Capability or something like that. And the basic idea is if the Army is trying to transition to having more forces regionally aligned, where like your brigade that has to live in the Arctic is also the one that you would tap first to fight in the Arctic, or the brigade that you have living in Hawaii is the one that you would have do jungle warfare, as opposed to the global war on terror approach where you've got a list of the brigades and you just rotate them through the sandbox. It's an idea to allow these units to get this large scale combat operations training on in the conditions in which they would fight under, ostensibly.
Which is good because and for our non-military people, NTC is in Fort Irwin, which is in the deserts of California, and JRTC is in the friggin' bayous of Louisiana. So you've got hot and dry and hot and wet, which are two places that historically the military has been, if not the Middle East, then the in the past jungles of Vietnam, and quietly not telling anybody, Laos and Cambodia. But now I guess, we have to start preparing for cold weather training, which nobody ever wants to do because fuck cold weather. Nobody has to pack all their snivel gear. But hey, with Russia kind of kicking some things up, who knows? Now I'm not going to say that like this was not created in response to what is currently happening with Ukraine. Something like this takes multiple years to plan before execution. So this is something that's probably been in the works for years and years. This isn't like, oh, Russia is getting froggy with Ukraine, we better start training for the snow. It just seems like at some point in time somebody's just like, we're really good at hot weather stuff, but we're not really good. We haven't done anything with cold weather. So let's set something up there.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thought behind it. It's been programmed in the budget for a little while now that they wanted to start doing these. They're calling them exportable CTC rotations for the units that are far away. And also from like a budget perspective, like it costs a lot of money to fly an entire brigade's worth of strikers, which are armored personnel carriers that won't get mistaken for tanks because they have wheels. Look, man, I gotta distinguish a little bit. I know what the people need.
They're just wheelie tanks.
It honestly saves millions of dollars to not have to fly them to NTC or JRTC. Mm-hmm. And something I like about it is that, so like the training people down at JRTC at Fort Polk their kind of nickname is Geronimo. And they have a reputation for just kicking the dog shit out of everybody who comes and try to stand toe to toe with them, like at their training center. Like that's kind of the entire point of these large scale training rotations, is for like these big US units to get a taste of just getting their faces kicked in by an opponent, and to hopefully learn from it before they deploy. And they took a bunch of people from ops group down at JRTC and flew them up to Alaska for this. And I'm also just really warmed at the thought of these dudes being cold right now, because everybody hates them. Everybody who's ever fought against them hates their guts. I know it's something that'll like
the armed forces of Atropia. Fuck them. They're just out there. The Op 4 guys. And I'll say oppositional force is fun to do, but when you're getting your ass, kicked by them, fuck them. And as well as the observers, man. The last time I had to do any of that shit, thankfully, one of our observers was like my old XO when I was in Iraq, so he was much nicer, at least to me, than everybody else. So it worked out for me. Two PAO guys hanging out while we watch a bunch of 42 series try to react to incoming fire. It's not good. Not good. That's why we train, though, right? That's why we train.
Allegedly.
Yeah. So this is going to be like a yearly thing, I guess, that they're going to start doing?
I'm not entirely sure, because the way that CTC rotations work is that they're not usually done annually. But comments from the Army Alaska commanding general that he made in a video kind of announcing the beginning of the rotation made me think that they might be trying to do this more often. That could be an annual thing, because we've got two brigades up in Alaska. We've got one at Fort Wainwright, which is in Fairbanks, and we've got one at Joint Base Almadorf Richardson, which is closer to Anchorage. And so it would make sense to like maybe have them do it every other year. But I think we'll see what lessons the Army learns from this rotation. Because the chief of staff, General James McConville, was saying just last week that they're watching this training event really closely to see like, hey, now that we're considering purpose designing an Arctic brigade, maybe we should pay attention to what our existing brigade in the Arctic does when forced to fight in an Arctic scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that is some consolation to the cold people that like the Army at least cares that they're out there in cold right now.
I'm like I said, I'm very surprised that we haven't had something like this already. Other than the fact that
they train up there, but like it's never before counted as like it's never before counted.
I've been to NTC though. Like they send reservists to NTC. They'll never, and that's good. Like they should. We need that training too. We need those experiences as well. I know plenty of people who have done JRTC, but like it's, and I get like logistically why it's done that way. It's just our shit is already there. Alaska is very far away. It's not easy to get things up there, but I mean, there's already a striker brigade up there, so there's no reason you can't just hot seat people. Just go up there. We have strikers. You can drive those around and then come back home. But yes, you really do need to kind of figure out how to fight in the cold weather, because that is not, you don't want to learn on the fly in the middle of a war. You want to at least have some sort of ground idea of like, we know that the strikers stop working when it hits a certain temperature, and here's what we have to do to get them moving again, or yes, anything like that.
The gasoline freezes at 50 below. Here's how to mitigate.
Right. Then you just gotta heat it up, right? Put a little open flame on your gas to melt it, and sure, that'll work perfectly fine. I'm sure the AARs after that one are going to be fantastic.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
Davis, thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking us through your stories. I like doing this. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully we're going to do it a little bit more in the future as well. Because I like to talk about all the other little things that are going on, especially when everybody's kind of focused on one big thing that's going on. It's all these little things are important too. We didn't get to the really nerd stuff about how email is still all fucked up for the Army, but I mean, what is there to say other
Francis, than it'll still be fucked up the next time we talk.
I know it's going to be fucked up forever. It's fine. Davis, thank you for coming on. Where can people find you?
So I am on Twitter at Davis_Winkie, WINKIE. You can read probably at least 25 to 40% of anything on ArmyTimes.com is what I write, because I am the Army Times staff reporter. So combine that with some stuff we borrow from our sister publications and the AP Wire, and you've got a whole news organization.
Yeah. So Davis is your guy for all kinds of military related stuff. Thank you for coming on, Davis, and everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Francis.